Chapter 9. Great hopes, great joy, great trust. When they fail, do so swiftly, an oblique and evil instant. They do not diminish little by little, so that a man you trusted yesterday, today you trust a little less. He is lost, damned, nothing of him remains but is false and as quicksand. Snake! Venomous little snake! From outside of the library door, where the Vine Street household was gathered, eager and close to hear its prodigy's triumph, came this single, bitter, trembling voice. Snake! Whether it was the housekeeper's, a footman's, the coachman's, no one knew. It was of no consequence. It was the voice of the household, shaken and shocked out of its pleasant dream by the dreadful words of the attorney. Within the library, the brisk fire still danced and gleamed on the polished wood and the calm brown walls and the gilded backs of the books. Miss Mansfield, elegant, handsome, and gay in a yellow brocaded dress, had lost every scrap of her complexion. She'd put her hand to her face as if to hide from the world her horror and dismay. She cried, "No, no, it's not so. You're mistook, sir. Not this boy, never, I tell you." But in her heart of hearts, she could not but believe the attorney, but because she wanted to, not because she wanted to, but because she dreaded it was so. "It is the boy I saw from my window in Curtis Court. I saw him struggle. I saw him stab. I saw him escape. There is no doubt. I wish to God there was. Forgive me." The attorney spoke low and shakingly, but his eyes were as cold as stone. If anything gleamed or flickered in them, the terrified Smith never saw it. If anything pricked in that subtle, black and dreadful place that he had suddenly divined was the attorney's heart, there was nothing to show for it, save once, when Miss Mansfield cried out for a second time. There was in her voice such a world of misery that Mr. Billings' white hands clenched and he seemed to flinch, as if his real love for Miss Mansfield had moaned. "You're murdering me, Miss Thomas Billing." Miss Mansfield moved, and the rustling of her dress was as a dragging sigh. She crossed the room to her father, that motionless man in his high-backed chair. She made to lay her hands on him, which was fixed upon his stick, but he sensed her intention and waved her off. The customary blandness of his face seemed carved out of granite, while Smith, who'd done nothing, could do nothing but moan in a dreadful amazement several times over. "You're mad! You're mad! I never laid a finger on the old man. I never touched the old man. I never. He retreated from them and began to glare very hopelessly about the room, to Miss Mansfield, to the window against which stood the sorrowful, terrible attorney, to the door behind which was the Vine Street household. No way out. Thoughts such as they were whirled in his head and made him feel sick. The blow that had fallen was inexplicable, frightful, crushing. He crept to Mr. Billing, stared up at him very piteously. You was wrong, Mr. Billing. For goodness sake, tell him, for you're a-killing me." But the attorney shook his handsome head. "Not wrong, Smith. I saw, I know." "Then damn you!" shouted Smith, and flew to the Mansfields' blind father and tragic daughter. "Miss, you knows me. I never done it. Swear on the scriptures. Swear. You believe me, Miss Mansfield, please?" In an inward agony, Miss Mansfield stared down at Smith and then to the sad but certain attorney, who seemed to have no reason in the world to lie. Maybe she remembered the Smith who'd first come to her and tried to rob her blind father's study. Maybe she thought the boy's fall was a punishment for her own pride in imagining she'd redeemed him. Who can tell what went on in her unhappy soul? "Oh, Smith," she whispered and turned away. "Then damn you too, you bedlam-made saint!" wept Smith helplessly, and bent down crouching at the magistrate's feet, his old blind justice, his mole in the hole. "Mr. Mansfield, you believe me, I know it. I can see it in you know me, and I know you. You know I never done him in." But the magistrate, to whom justice was the only fixed thing in a dark, uncertain world, said nothing. He was casting out of his heart and his mind everything save the attorney's measured words and the urchin's frantic denials. Word against word. "Mr. Mansfield," whispered Smith, staring up and seeing his own face distortedly reflected in the blind man's black spectacles. "You must believe. It wasn't me. It was them two men in brown and..." "Two men in brown?" Yes, and you saw them kill him?" I... Yet you told me once you'd never seen Mr. Field." Too late. Smith realized he'd ruined himself. Now he was done for. The blind man sighed like the winter wind. So it was you who killed him." The world fell away, and Smith, still crouching on the floor and watching the blind man's lips, felt as lonely, bitter, and forlorn as if he were already on the gallows. Softly the blind man went on. "Which hand did you see, Smith? Was it the one you gave me that night we met? Was it the same small helping hand? Tell me, Smith. Don't be ashamed, for didn't I say to you that devils and angels are all one to me?" "Voices in the night," muttered Smith despairingly. "We're all voices in the night to you, you poor old blind fool. You will be committed to prison to await your trial." "Trial? What do you want me to try me for? Might as well do me in now. What's one voice less in your noisy night, Mr. Magistrate Mansfield? You'll never see me face when I'm nubbed. Nothing'll haunt you. You done right. You have. All I hope is for your sake and mine that if you goes to heaven, then I goes to hell, for I wouldn't want you to clap even dead eyes on me." "Smith, I never done it, Mr. Mansfield." "You'll be tried and nubbed. God have mercy on your soul. Not if he's got a blind old gent like you." Smith. But Smith did not say another word. He shook his head with an air of grimness and despair. He had retired a great way within himself, and whatever he found there seemed to absorb him entirely. He was much mishandled as he was bundled into the coach, for the Vine Street household were very bitter and outraged by the monstrousness of Smith, even those who, but an hour before, had decided once and for all that there was much goodness in him, and had vowed never again to judge by appearances. Even they thrust bleak and savage faces close to his, to let him know that what the world now thought. There was a good deal of treading on his face and jerking of his clothes. Two of his bright buttons were torn off and side of his face was bruised, but all he did was to shake his head endlessly, even to the one kindly face that managed to push its way in among all the anger and contempt to look at him through the coach window. It was Meg, the scullery maid. Her eyes were as large and round and wet as Margate oysters. "I'll come and see you, dear. I'll bring you something nourishing. Don't fret, little Smith. Meg won't forget you, dear." In the general commotion, something had been forgotten, or would have been but for the scrupulous attorney. Wait, he shouted from the window. "The warrant! The warrant was sworn and witnessed." "I'll take it down, sir." The magistrate nodded wearily. "And I'll go with him to the jail." "There's no need, Billing. There's no need for you to endure any more. I'll go, sir. It's the least I can do. Let the wretched child have some company on the journey. I'll see him decently lodged." Miss Mansfield raised her eyes to Mr. Billing. Their look much moved him. "We thank you, sir, for this kindness," she sighed. "I blame myself for this. It was I who encouraged the boy. My father was not a party to it, but he was too kind to urge his better judgment. And now, she spread out her hands and shook her head. Then she seemed to recover herself somewhat and frowned in a resemblance of her old manner. "Papa, you have a donkey for a daughter, a sentimental, foolish donkey. So we must be thankful for Mr. Billing, who's proved himself the best and truest of friends." She curtsied. "Your servant, sir. Your very humble servant." The coach was waiting, much scraped from more than ordinary collision with the uneven arch. Within crouched Smith, wiping from his face what the new coachman had spat in it. "To Newgate," ordered the attorney, and joined his victim. The coach moved off, and for a little way the two occupants stared at each other, the one incredulously, the other calmly. Then, when the wheels had settled down to a steady, loud rattle, Mr. Billing leaned forward. The skin around his eyes puckered somewhat, as if to suggest a smile, but his eyes were still like stone. Give it to me, boy. Duly, Smith began to comprehend. He stared back at the attorney with violent hatred. For God's sake, boy, there's not much time. Give it to me, the paper you stole from the old man. Let me have it, and you can go. I ain't got it, and I know you have. Search me, or are you afraid of being bit? For I'm a venomous little snake, I am. The attorney looked at the boy sharply, then withdrew the hand he'd held out. He shook his head with a curious air of gentleness. All right, lad, I believe you. What was in it? Dunno. Then where is it? Dunno. Don't your life mean a fig to you? Dunno. Mr. Billing compressed his lips, then shook his head again with the same strange gentleness as before. He sighed. You're foolish, young man, I promise. I'll help you, but you must tell me. It's your only chance. All right. Keep silent now if you must. I'll understand, but believe me, young Smith, I'm your truest friend, and soon you'll come to see it. Not today, nor even tonight, but tomorrow maybe. I'll visit you, boy, and we'll talk again. Lay our cards on the table, eh? And then, who knows, but maybe we'll be friends. You and me, Smith. Don't look so despairing, son. I'm not a villain. It's this vile world we live in, boy. But Smith continued to look despairing. The blow that had befallen him was more terrible even than the attorney guessed at. The document was lost, and though at last he could have read it, it was further away from him now than ever it had been since he'd picked Mr. Field's pocket. It had brought him nothing but disaster, but it seemed his life depended on it. He hated it, he dreaded it, yet it was as though he'd sold his soul for it. Newgate Jail, sir, shouted the coachman grimly. Mr. Billings sighed and Smith groaned, while the old birds on the Old Bailey and St. Paul's screeched out in higher triumph. Jug him! Jug him! At last they were about to be obliged.